I mean, the Colts just cannot win in Jacksonville. You don't just walk into TIAA Bank Stadium, in early January and get a win. I mean, it's people talk about winning in Lambeau Field, during this time of year. I mean, it's kind of the same thing down at the bank.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Week 18 of the NFL season. We have made it. This is Monkey Knife Fight's NFL preview show. I'm your host, Dan Watkins. Joining me, the dynamic duo from RotoWire, John McKechnie and Nick Whalen. Boys, how we doing?
Nick, lead us off. You got the haircut. Oh, okay. All right. I'll get started here. Let's see. Back in the ATL. Hotlanta, as everyone calls it around here, that's totally a thing. Heading to Indianapolis on Sunday. It's apparently pretty chilly up there, but getting excited for that. Going to, I don't know, there's some football game up there on Monday night that I'm looking forward to, and mostly just been meditating and preparing for that, but also this segment, of course.
Yeah, I can confirm. I mean, Indianapolis is a little south of where I am in Milwaukee, or MKE, as they say. It's currently 0 degrees here. It's miserable. I've reached that point in the year where I get to this point every single year where it's like, why do I not live in Florida? Nobody's forcing me to live here at all. I get into my car, everything is frosted over. I've misplaced my little scraper thing, so I just have to sit there and wait for everything to de-ice. It's a miserable time. I absolutely hate winter. There's nothing beneficial about it whatsoever. I'm getting a lot of pressure to go like ice skating and stuff, which I don't really want to do at all. But nonetheless, we have a great sports weekend ahead of us. That's the saving grace here. Big win for Wisconsin basketball last night. Hopefully, a lot going on in Week 18 in the NFL. And then, of course, John, Monday night, the Dogs.
Yeah, baby.
Monday night, can't wait. We're going to have a full preview and breakdown of that on Monday on MKF. John and I will be doing that. I don't know, Nick might join as well. You're more than welcome if you want to join the college football show again. It worked out pretty well for Georgia last week, so maybe John will force you to come on. I don't know. We'll find out. But anyways, it is Week 18 of the NFL season. Now that we're here to Week 18, first time we've had a Week 18 in the NFL. How do you guys feel now that we've arrived? Do we like the extra 1 week of the regular season? Do we wish it was the playoffs already? Do we just not care? How do we feel, John?
This is one of those things that, when they announced it last year that they were expanding to 18 weeks and 17 games, I thought it would have a much larger impact on my outlook of the season, but when you break it down into the micro, like it just feels like another week. It feels like a little bit strange that it's still the regular season and we're a week into January at this point. But it's a decent slate of games. I mean, a lot of things have already kind of been decided, and not a ton is going to be on the table playoff wise in a lot of these games. But even still, more NFL is always good, I think, is kind of the bottom line that I kind of fall on.
I feel the exact same way. I didn't love it at first. I mean, I definitely wouldn't call myself like a traditionalist by any means, but for like records purposes, it just kind of feels a little unnecessary, and just kind of throws everything into a word that I feel like John would use, a tizzy, when you're talking about like the sack record that might be broken. Cooper Kupp's got some records on the line here. Like, I don't know. I kind of like being able to standardize everything for historical purposes. And it was just like such a blatant money grab by the NFL to add this extra week. But at the same time, I mean, the NFL season always flies by. It feels like, we wait forever for week 1 to come around. Then all of a sudden it's week 12 and then the season's over. So, I'm not going to complain about getting extra football.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the record thing, because there are 4 single season records that could be broken this weekend. 2 of them by Cooper Kupp for both receptions and receiving yards. You got TJ Watt possibly breaking the sack record with 1.5 sacks this weekend. And then you also have the interception record that could be broken from 1952. I mean, Trayvon Diggs would have to have an absolute monster game to break this. He needs 3 picks to tie, 4 to break it. So probably not going to happen, but you never know. Who are they playing? Washington this week? So
Philly.
I think they got Philly. Yeah. So I mean,
we'll
see. I mean, we'll see how many snaps Hurts and Minshew potentially play. I mean, if we get down to like Philly's third quarterback, who knows?
Right. I mean, it could. I mean, I just want Dick Night Train Lane's name to remain in the record book forever, though. So that's just my personal bias.
Yeah.
I think when it comes down to it now, I think there should be kind of like a designation, like these are the 16 game records, these are the 17 game records, and just kind of go from there. That's my thought on that.
Right. Well, I mean, with Watt, Watt has missed how many games, right? So like, I think is this going to be like his 15th game played? I mean, I think with that one, I mean, that's plenty legit. But yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of that's going to be kind of glossed over in history, and people are not necessarily going to remember who played how many snaps or who missed a game somewhere early on in the season. I think you're right that there's going to be kind of a clear mark between, just as there is now when we talk about like, oh yeah, well that was the 14 game season, now it's the 16 game season, and now I think everything's going to kind of have a new line for the 17 game season.
And the sack record's a little weird to begin with because Brett Favre did dive to get straight in the record back in 2001 or 2002, whatever it was. So good for TJ Watt for getting there. Anyways, another great part about this week that I love, the last week of the regular season, is just weird playoff scenarios that could somehow come to fruition if certain things happen. And Nick, your Jacksonville Jaguars just happen to be kind of like the linchpin that could just set forth a chain reaction and just completely blow up the space-time continuum, to borrow a phrase from Doc Brown. If they beat the Colts this weekend in Jacksonville, which they've done every year since 2014. So it's not like that's completely out of the realm here. But I mean, you have the possibility of, if Jacksonville wins, that you have the Raiders and the Chargers could just tie Sunday night and they both get in. It keeps Baltimore alive. It keeps Pittsburgh alive. So like, how are you feeling as a Jags fan? Do you want that first pick or do you want chaos?
I mean, I don't know how you couldn't feel confident. I mean, the Colts just cannot win in Jacksonville. You don't just walk into TIAA Bank Stadium, in early January and get a win. I mean, it's people talk about like winning in Lambeau Field, during this time of year. I mean, it's kind of the same thing down at the bank. It just doesn't happen. Teams like Indianapolis consistently struggle. No, I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath, obviously, right? I mean, I think we're finally going to see the which is just one of the strangest streaks. I didn't even know about this until this week that they hadn't won there in like 7 years. But I think that's going to come to an end. I feel pretty safe saying that. I think the Jags, especially these last couple of weeks, have looked more like a JV team than ever. I still remain confident in Trevor Lawrence, even though he looks like worse and worse every week. I don't think he's the problem. Like, he'll throw 2 or 3 picks, and then 2 plays later will just float in like a perfect 35-yard ball between 2 defenders. And you're reminded like, oh yeah, this guy actually is good. There's no reason to jump off of him. But I mean, it's amazing the lack of skill that they have at virtually every other position, especially after losing James Robinson. Like, they have arguably like the worst running back group in the league, arguably the worst receiver group in the league. The offensive line is probably somewhere near the top of the bottom 10. And I think they have the least talented defense in the entire league. They have no speed. Like, other than Miles Jack, can anyone even name a player on that Jags defense? Like, they've wiped everybody away from the great Jags defense of like 2017, 2018. It's a complete mess. I find myself, just kind of, I'm not even excited to watch them anymore. Like, there's not even like a lot to watch for development purposes other than Trevor Lawrence.
You were excited to watch them?
I was coming into the year. I put a fair amount of money on the Jags over back in July. I think it was like 5.5. So I bet the Jags over. I bet the Jags to win the AFC South, and I bet the Jags to make the playoffs. And like 1 week into the season, I knew those were all going to be losers.
Oh, so I went to Gillette Stadium last week and saw the Jags in person. Couple things. Couple things stuck out. One, Trevor Lawrence's hair in person, it's freaking glorious, man. Like, that is nice. It's really nice. That is a beautiful head of hair. Like, I was mesmerized by it.
Yeah,
watching
that should be
those beautiful flowing locks just jogging out of the field. Secondly, that was a glorified scrimmage. 50 to 10, the Pats completely ran up the score. And then third, what I happened to notice in the parking lot during the tailgate, a lot of leopard print, jaguar print pants as well to go with the full. So I guess my question is, Nick, do you have a pair of cheetah print or leopard print clothing?
No, I don't. I mean, I wish. Obviously those are really expensive, high end items. I just I'm kind of saving up to hopefully acquire some of those someday. But no, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen. They're trying to organize like we've heard about a whiteout or a blackout. This is a clown out in Jacksonville.
Oh yeah,
this weekend they're trying to get everyone to dress like clowns to represent essentially everyone in a leadership position with this organization, particularly ownership. which is like staying steadfast to like keeping the worst GM of all time. So very interested to see how many people actually follow through with that, because the amount of influence that the Jaguars have on Twitter is not proportional to how good of a team they are. So I think a fair amount of people are actually going to show up in clown suits to the bank on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the AVIs on Twitter. Like it was, I just like woke up one day last week and like all of a sudden my timeline is like 30, 40 clown AVIs with the mustache.
Right.
You know, I don't think the mustache is clownish, of course, but
No.
you know, we're talking Shad Khan, I suppose. But
Yep.
either way, I just hope that this is not like the 2016 viral marketing where they're just weird clown appearances, and then it turned out to just be like advertising for the It movie. So as long as there's no It 3 that comes out of this, you know, I'm in favor of just clowning out in Jacksonville.
If you follow Nick on Twitter, the algorithm will just immediately associate you with Jaguars fandom. And so that's the reason you probably are seeing 40 clown avatars.
Yeah.
I've been wondering. Like it's been happening a lot. But anyways, that brings us to our poll question this week. We have a great poll. It's still active for, well, not much longer, about 8 minutes on Monkey Knife Fight's Twitter page. But anyways, our question this
Get those
week,
responses in.
at MKF, get those responses
Sound
in.
off.
Right. You can always comment afterwards. Is it okay to renounce your fandom and switch teams? So I guess I'll start with you, Nick, because, well, one, your Jacksonville Jaguars, once again, looks like it's going to be first overall pick in the NFL draft. Two, I believe you've been to 4 straight Green Bay Packer games. Is that correct? So is this actually?
Yeah, I have. I knew I was going to have to address this. I have. I've been to 0 Jaguars games, so I understand your line of questioning here. But yeah, I just kept kind of finding my way into tickets. All right, I didn't mean to go to 4 straight. There's really only one that I planned to go to, and then my dad got tickets to one, and I went with him. Nice little father-son bonding experience. I went to the Christmas Day game with my girlfriend's brothers. Another nice bonding experience. And then I got kind of a last-second ticket offer to go last week, and honestly, I was like dead set on just taking the weekend off, watching Red Zone, hanging out. And I was like, you know what, why not? We'll keep the streak going here. Saw 4 Packers victories. So, not a lot of people have mentioned that when Nick Whalen is in the stadium, the Packers are, extremely undefeated, massive point differential. But trust me, I've considered fully switching over. If the Packers win the Super Bowl this year and the Jaguars get smacked by 50 on Sunday, it's going to be tough. It's definitely going to be difficult. I feel like I've given all that I can to the Jaguars. I've given them chance after chance after chance. And they're nowhere close to being even a like remote playoff team right now. Where it's not like, oh, maybe next year they can win 8 or 9 games. I mean, we're 2-3 years from even discussing a potential second wildcard berth for the Jags. So will I ever completely jump ship? I don't think so, but they are on thinner ice now than they ever have been.
So John, same question to you. And I know there's a big game coming up Monday night, but if your Bulldogs, if they lose again here, are you just going to like give up and become like I don't know, Florida Atlantic fan or something like that, and just get out of the SEC and just put Nick Saban completely out of your thoughts forever?
Yeah, I can't quite do it. And, college is different than pros because, like you obviously like when you go to a school, it becomes a little bit more like intertwined with your life in general. But, there will be some soul searching as to maybe how much I want to put into my fandom if Georgia loses to Saban again. The man has tormented me for years, dating back to like the 2012 SEC championship game, 2015, my first time going back to Athens. It was like the number 1 versus number 3 matchup. Monsoon rain and Alabama just pants Georgia in public. Horrible. And then, of course, the Natty piggybacked by the SEC championship, both of which Alabama pulls out their backup quarterback and wins. Those are soul crushing, soul cleaving. I don't really put too much stock into the game last year with Stetson Bennett. Obviously, I was in attendance for the SEC championship. So, I mean, the list goes on. It's pretty brutal. I need this one on a spiritual level. But when it comes to jumping ship as a fan at the NFL level, I've been lucky that I grew up in the DC area, but my dad's a Baltimore guy. So I've been a Ravens fan my whole life. But I have all my childhood friends are Washington football team fans, and that is a tormented existence. That is an existence that you really do see up close and personal. People like confronting their demons about the franchise. And like, John, is it okay if I'm a Ravens fan now? And it's like, yes, it's okay. It's okay. You're safe here. You're warm now. Because Dan Snyder has completely alienated that fan base. You can see like the visceral, like the pipe bursting in week one at FedEx Field, and it being like this perfect metaphor for kind of how Snyder treats the fans there. So if you're a football team fan, I think you're well within your rights to shop around.
I mean, that stadium's completely falling apart. Last week, and Jalen Hurts almost got crushed. I mean,
Seriously.
I thought it was amazing just how some of those people, though, like they just took a legit face plant and immediately they're up asking for autographs. I mean, like going right after the prize there, and they know what they're doing. And that camera, nobody talked about either. That camera guy, I think he might have like dislocated his shoulder or something, because he got absolutely crushed on that one. On him.
The Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yeah. Well, no, there was the NFL camera guy, like right when the thing toppled over, it came down right directly on his shoulder. So he could have gotten seriously hurt there. But
I love that Hurts had to write like an open letter to the stadium, like, please fix this. Like, has that ever happened before? Like, as a player from an opposing team, criticized another team's arena or stadium. Like, this is unprecedented.
I suppose that there's probably some, glass house type of vibes, because Philadelphia famously, the vet took a lot of players.
Right. Like there's a prison in your stadium.
Yeah, sir.
And then who was it Gus Farrat that like concussed himself by like running into the wall?
That is correct.
Gave it the old headbutt. Yeah.
Yep, the headbutt. Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure some people have gotten hurt doing the Lambeau leap too, but I don't think there's ever been a letter written. The Gus Farrat show. That's right. I think I had his card for a while. I don't know what happened to it. But anyways, let's move on. Let's do a little speed round here. A lot of these games, there are some playoff implications involved with some of them. I believe just the Cincinnati Bengals are the only team that's flat out said, yeah, we're resting our starters. So no Joe Burrow this weekend. As they're getting ready for, what a world is right. The Cincinnati Bengals are resting their starters the last week of the regular season. But let's do a little speed round here. I guess we'll put 2 minutes on the clock like always, and we'll see if we hit it. If we don't, we don't. If we do, we do. Yeah. John, let's start with you. Ryan Tannehill at Houston, 225.5 passing yards, more or less, for Tannehill.
I'm going to take the more. I still am not sold on that Tennessee run game, and AJ Brown being back. He can do a lot of the legwork as far as Tannehill getting to that number. So I'll take the more.
All right, Nick. AJ Brown at Houston, 70.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I think you got to go more here. I mean, there is something on the line for Tennessee. They need to win to hang on to that 1 seed. We're assuming KC probably wins tomorrow. So I think we see at least a all-on assault from the Titans offense for as long as they need to clinch that game.
John, on the other side, Brandon Cooks, Houston's wide receiver, going against the Titans, 5.5 receptions, more or less.
I'm going to take the more. I mean, this guy is quietly having such a great season. It's unfortunate it's just kind of being frittered away for a team that, if not for the Jaguars, might be the most embarrassing team in all of that in the NFL. But that guy's been consistent. He's been really good all year. So I'm going to take the more. I think he's going to be heavily involved Sunday.
Nick, Jonathan Taylor taking on your Jacksonville Jaguars, 119.5 rushing yards, more or less.
Everything points to the more here against a certain defense, but I'm going to go less. I think the Colts take care of business early. I mean, this is a game that could be like 17-0 at the end of the first quarter. And obviously they would like to rest, as many players, especially Jonathan Taylor, as they can once this game is in hand. So I think Taylor goes crazy for the first half, but then hopefully doesn't play a lot in the second. So I think he actually ends up going under.
All right, John, your guy, Mark Andrews, taking on the Steelers at home, 60.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I'm going to go with the more. Again, it's definitely more themed shows thus far. But, when Tyler Huntley's the quarterback, he looks in two places. He looks at Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown. So the targets are going to be there for Andrews. He'll hit this number. Give me the more.
And finally, Ben Roethlisberger in his last game, possibly, if they don't make the playoffs here, at Baltimore. Nick, 200.5 passing yards for Big Ben, more or less.
Got to go less, right? And John, can you explain to me why the Ravens are 5-point favorites in this game? Like, I get that maybe they're the slightly better team when they're at relatively full strength, but 5 points seems like kind of a lot, right? I mean, given there's a ton of variance in this game.
Yeah, that's way too many points. I mean, this game is always closer than that. It seems like it's almost always a field goal game. I don't think dollars to donuts that the Ravens are 5 points better or even 2 points better than the Steelers. Both teams are deeply flawed, but well coached at the same time. But even still, considering all that, I would take the Steelers to cover that point spread, even if I think that, it's kind of donkeyish to say, but I still think the Ravens can win, but not by 5.5.
Yeah, but I'll go less on Big Ben, by the way. I mean, after what we saw the other night, it's like he threw the ball, 46 times and didn't even get to like anywhere close to 200 yards. I mean, that honestly reminded me so much of Kobe's last game, where it was like, oh, he dropped 60. It's like, yeah, he took like 60 shots. I mean, are you even watching this game? Like, it was eerily similar.
Yeah, Ben is just such a large human being too. It's remarkable. I mean, some of my favorite Ben Roethlisberger memories are just like having like 3 defenders hanging off him, and he's still rolling out, hucking the ball like 50 yards down the field.
Yeah, that guy I didn't think it was a lot of damage onto me emotionally over the years as well.
It was a cool tribute, though.
Was it common knowledge that Ben Roethlisberger like punted a decent amount in college? I was looking back at his like MAC numbers. He punted 25 times in college. He had like 10 punts his sophomore year, 10 punts his junior year.
Did not know that.
He's also had about 4 or 5 punts in the NFL, and I don't remember a young Ben punting either.
I think that's just like forgotten knowledge that like we definitely did know about it in like 2006 and then just like forgot about it.
They would occasionally, I guess before it was cool to go for it on 4th down, they would get to that no man's land, not trust their kicker, and just have Ben in the shotgun and do a little pooch punt. I do remember that actually.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember him punting like routinely in college though.
Yeah, like 10 Maction punts a year. It was.
I'm just picturing Mel Kiper in like the 2004 draft broadcast. Like, look at the form.
You talk about a guy who can punt. You talk about punting. You talk about throwing.
Todd. Anyway, so now that 2004 draft class is about to be completely exited from the league, which one had the best career? Eli, Philip, or Ben?
Nick, lead us off.
Man, I think Rivers was the best pure player of that group. I mean, obviously Eli and Ben had the Super Bowls. I think Roethlisberger is probably the most accomplished. I mean, it's really close. It's actually a really interesting debate because I think you could make a pretty strong case for all 3. Although for me, I think Eli is pretty easily 3rd in that group. Like eye test wise, Eli just never quite seemed like he was on that same level. But I mean, Roethlisberger and Rivers, each like the numbers are going to be really similar. Both of them played well, into their late 30s. But I think I would probably give the slight edge to Roethlisberger. Again, 2 Super Bowls, led the league in yardage multiple times, had some big time individual seasons. Obviously, the Steelers were always right there. And with Rivers, like as great as he was, there was still always this narrative that like, do you really trust this guy in a big game? And over, the answer was kind of resoundingly no. And I felt like Roethlisberger's reputation was the opposite, where you get him to the AFC playoffs and this guy's always going to find ways to win. Whereas it wasn't always Rivers' fault, but you always kind of felt like his teams were going to find a way to lose.
Even in the regular season.
Ben also had 52 game-winning drives versus Eli's 35 and Phillip Rivers 37. Like, there's a pretty big difference there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think, the comeback artist part of Roethlisberger's, kind of overall resume is extremely impressive. Like he was that guy that he was like the last person you wanted to be facing if you were up by a score or less with the last drive coming down, because like Dan said, just so hard to bring down, so good at extending plays. I can like remember distinctly like so many times the Ravens like had him wrapped up. He found a way to escape and get rid of the ball, make a play. One time it was like a Sunday nighter. Haloti Ngata came in, breaks his nose. Roethlisberger's nose bleeding all over the place. Then like a few plays later, he escapes Terrell Suggs and gets rid of it, extends the game and ends up winning it. But as far as the overall careers go, the 2 rings, I think you have to kind of eliminate Rivers from the conversation as a result of that. So it's between Roethlisberger and Eli, and like Eli had a couple of good seasons, but Roethlisberger was great for pretty much the entirety of his career. I mean, these last couple of years post elbow injury have obviously been rough to watch, but vintage Ben, it's one of the best quarterbacks I think I've seen in my lifetime, honestly.
For what it's worth, on Football Reference, they do the Hall of Fame monitor. It's more prevalent for baseball, and it's like way more in depth for baseball, but the football version is pretty good too. And they basically give a score to every player, and it takes into account, like how many times you've led the league in certain categories, playoff success, all that. Ben Roethlisberger's number is 99.2. Phillip Rivers' number is 98.1. So they're like, could not be more similar in that regard.
Yeah. Just Phillip was just missing like the one win. If Phillip had one Super Bowl, I think, or if he at least got to a Super Bowl, you might be able to make the argument a little better.
Yeah, right. And he's well ahead of Roethlisberger in approximate value, which is essentially like the war of football.
Yeah, he's like top 10 in like every category, I think.
Yeah. He's like 8th all time, and Roethlisberger's 15th. He's about 20 points ahead, which is a pretty fair gap, actually.
My only argument against Hall of Fame monitor is that Matt Ryan has 100.68, so that feels a little off. But I think
winning the MVP gives you a huge boost.
Yes, because there's only X amount of MVPs, and almost all of
them
are probably in the Hall of Fame. Tom Brady, 257.95.
Will he get in?
Good.
Good question.
It's Tom Brady, a Hall of Famer.
I'll argue the counter.
Fine.
Very good. All right, let's move on. Let's do a little late afternoon.
You guys gonna do Chiefs Broncos too, because that game has some, right? No, did we not put it on the rundown?
We can make up our own numbers.
We can make it up.
Yeah. Oh, I could just drop them in the chat. I'm sorry. I thought that was on the rundown because that's like that game has some meaning because the Chiefs are playing for a 1 seed, aren't they?
If they win and Tennessee loses,
yeah, and the Broncos play them tough usually, so.
Right, but Teddy's out. It's Drew Lock, so probably not.
It's Drew Lock show. All right, it's 269.5 and 185.5 for your quarterbacks.
All right, Patrick Mahomes, 269.5 Saturday Night Football. John, what do you like out of Mahomes this week?
I'm going to go with less. I think that the Broncos do have a really strong pass defense. I think that Mahomes has a good game, an efficient game, but I think that this one ends up being a little bit lower scoring, a little bit less offense than maybe we're expecting. So I will go with less.
Nick?
I'll go with less as well. He's gone under that number pretty comfortably in 5 of his last 6. And it feels like he's been whipping the ball around and having these huge games. But really, other than that Chargers game, that hasn't quite been the case. So, yeah, I think that pattern continues. I think KC certainly does what it needs to do to take care of business to win this game. But again, I mean, this is like a 10.5 or 11-point spread. So this is another one like the Jonathan Taylor line where if the Chiefs are up comfortably, midway through the third quarter, I could see them sitting Mahomes and just kind of riding this one out and getting out of there with a win.
Then you got Drew Lock on the other side, John, 185.5, more or less for Drew Lock.
It feels gross, but I'm going to go with the more. It's a low number. I think that the Broncos are going to be trailing, and really this is a huge audition spot for Locke to have a spot on this roster next year or to even have a chance to compete for the starting job. I would imagine that the Broncos do something about their quarterback situation going into next year so they don't have to necessarily rely on him. But Locke needs to do something here to kind of advance his NFL career. So I think he is going to be able to hit the more than 189.5.
Drew Lock participating in the annual Matt Flynn audition game. Nick, more or less 185.5.
More. He's just going to air it out, right? I mean, there's nothing to lose here. Whether they're hanging around in this game or whether it's a blowout, I think he's kind of has really no reins at this point. Like there's no consequences in this game for Denver. So I see no reason why he's not just going to be whipping it around, especially in the second half.
All right. Very good. Let's move on. Let's talk late afternoon Sunday, 4:00 speed round. Nick, Matt Stafford versus San Francisco, 265.5 passing yards, more or less.
I don't know if Matthew Stafford is even good anymore. Some of his bad throws week to week are just unbelievably bad these days. And he could have 2 or 3 more picks than he's had, and he has 6 over the last 3 games. But the yardage has been there. It was there against Baltimore last week. I do think San Francisco puts up more of a fight here. So I'm gonna go less on 265.5. I think the Rams find a way to win this game, but it's more so because the Niners have trouble moving the ball, presumably with Trey Lance. And I think Stafford's kind of up and down play continues.
John, Cooper Kupp versus the Niners, 8.5 receptions, more or less. He needs 12 to set the single season record.
Yeah, record being on the line. It doesn't even feel like funneling 12 plus targets to Cooper Kupp is necessarily even forcing it. But I think with that kind of added detail on the line, I think that the Rams are going to make sure it happens. So I will take the more.
He needs 118 receiving yards as well. So something to keep in mind there when you play your contest this weekend. Nick, on the other side, Jimmy G with that bad thumb, 230.5 passing yards against the Rams, more or less.
Definitely less. I mean, for one, we don't even know for sure if he's going to play. If he does, I mean, this is even if Jimmy G was healthy, you'd be like, I don't know if he could get to this number. And then you're talking about a pretty serious injury on his throwing hand for a guy who is super up and down week to week. So, I mean, as of now, for me, this is a pretty easy less.
Yeah, I think when he spoke Wednesday this week, he said it feels like the webbing in his hand is being torn off every time he throws the football.
Yeah. So throw that guy out there in a must-win game.
A little painful.
Should be fine.
George Kittle, his big tight end at the Rams, 70.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I'm going to go with less. It kind of dovetails off of Nick's analysis for what the passing game is going to look like for San Francisco. And I think also, the Rams can go a couple different ways with how they want to deploy Jalen Ramsey, but they used him on Mark Andrews a little bit last week. I see them doing the same to Kittle, especially if Kittle starts to get some momentum, and they'll use Ramsey on him to slow that down. So I'm going to take the less.
Josh Allen taking on the Jets at home. 250.5 passing yards, more or less.
I got to take the less, but it has everything to do with game flow and nothing really to do with him struggling with the Jets necessarily. I think that the Bills are going to be able to put this game on ice relatively quickly, relatively easily, despite the Jets being a little bit feisty here down the stretch. I still think that the Bills go ahead and just kind of make this one a snoozer, and I don't think that Allen lights it up necessarily from a fantasy perspective.
All right, Nick, I'll give you two here to end. You got Stephon Diggs taking on the Jets, 75.5 receiving yards, and then Jalen Waddle taking on the Patriots, 5.5 receptions.
I definitely like the under or the less on Diggs. He's gone over that total only once at his last 7. And like John said, I think, this is a game that Buffalo should take care of pretty easily. I mean, the Jets have a bunch of guys out. It's a game that they're completely overmatched in, even if both sides are healthy. And this is another, kind of the same logic I've been playing with a lot of these teams where Buffalo's going to get up early and, they're not going to do anything more than they have to. You're not going to want to get anybody injured in the second half. So they should be up comfortably at halftime. And I think we see a lot of second and third stringers after that. On the Waddle front, I think we got to go more here. I mean, I love this Patriots defense. This is going to be actually, I think, a really interesting game. The thing is, I don't really trust Tua. I more than trust Waddle. He's been amazing this year. And he's one of those guys that I loved so much in college. And I was kind of worried that he wouldn't turn out. There's no way he could be as cool in the NFL as he was in college, but boy, was I wrong about that. And he's dealing with a quarterback in Tua that I don't like. So the question is, how much can Bill Belichick, really confuse Tua and force him into bad throws like we saw last week against Tennessee? If Tua struggles, Waddle struggles. He only had 3 catches for 47 last week. But I think he bounces back and goes more here.
Important to note, Tua Tagovailoa, undefeated against Bill Belichick so far in his career. 2-0.
Belichick killer.
He's 2-0. Something to watch out. Yep. Yep. There you go. All right. Sunday Night Football. We got a great AFC West showdown. Both these teams with playoff implications on the line. Hypothetically, if the Jags somehow pull off that upset and win their 7th straight in Jacksonville against the Colts, then both these teams, they just need to tie and they get in the playoffs. But anyways, you got Chargers, Raiders. Do we have projections yet, Jay? No, of course not. All right. But anyways, we'll build a nice little 5x5 for you guys.
We will? With no projections? We're just going to build it?
With no projections. We're just going to wing it.
If you build it, they will come.
Yep. And we'll start with Justin Herbert. I'm going to make up and guess his number is going to be somewhere around 240 yards, more or less, for Herbert. The Raiders come into this game with the 10th ranked pass defense, allowing just 214 yards per game. First matchup of the season, he only threw for 222. Nick, how do you feel about Herbert Sunday night?
I really, really want to trust Herbert in the Chargers. Every time I watch the Raiders, I just don't think they're good. They don't look like a good team, and yet they keep finding ways to win these games. They had no business winning that Browns game a few weeks ago. They really had no business beating the Colts, even with some bad bounces going their way in that game. They just found a way, and I think at some point that luck is going to run out. I think the Chargers are the markedly better team in almost every area, especially on offense with Justin Herbert and the weapons they have. But while the Raiders are finding ways to win games that they shouldn't, the Chargers always find ways to lose games that they should win. So I do think this is I would basically what I'm saying is I don't know how this game is going to go, but I think it's a big day for Herbert. I know this Raiders defense has played well But they should have the advantage. I mean, if you have a healthy Eckler, you got Mike Williams, you got Keenan Allen. That's a lot of weapons for a banged up Raiders defense to have to keep in check. So I don't know that the Chargers do enough to win the game, but I think Herbert does enough to go over the number.
John?
Well, first of all, very sharp number there, Dan.
Yeah.
You really, it stumped me right up. Stumped me right off the bat. I'll go with the more as well. I just think that this game will be competitive enough to where Herbert's going to need to kind of like put it on his shoulders to get it done here. And I think the Raiders going to be a little bit shorthanded in the secondary. I think that the 10th ranked pass defense is a very valid, legitimate stat, but when they're shorthanded, I think it means a little bit less. So I think this sets up a little bit more favorably for the Chargers pass game here. I will take the more.
Chargers running game, though, does feature Austin Eckler, who had a monster game against the Raiders the first time these two teams played. He had 117 yards on the ground plus 2 touchdowns. Eckler, I'm going to guess his number is going to be right around, let's go with 58.5 rushing yards for Eckler. John, more or less for Eckler against the Raiders defense, who's giving up about 116 yards per game on the ground.
I'll take the more here. I know that, a lot of his fantasy production is through the air as well. So like you have to account for that, like his total yards from scrimmage, you got to subtract a decent bit from the pass catching part of that. But I still think that he can get into the 60s here. So I'll take the more.
And what if let's say his fantasy props like 18.5?
Ooh, I'll take the more. I think that this sets up really nicely for him. So I'll take the more on that.
Nick?
Yeah, I'll take the more as well. I mean, you cited, the Raiders are giving up almost 120 yards per game on the ground. And when it comes to fantasy, obviously, Eckler's one of the best backs in terms of receiving and giving you value there. I mean, he's got, 7 catches over the last 2 games. He's got 5 or 6 games this year with 6+ catches. So, I feel more confident, I think, about the fantasy point prop than I do the rushing yardage prop.
Then you got Keenan Allen. Let's go with his props going to be right around 68.5 in that kind of 70 range for Keenan. His lowest yardage and output of the season did come against the Raiders back in week 4 when he only had 36 yards on 7 catches. Nick, if you like a big day out of Herbert, you got to go with Allen, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, it's a little concerning, I guess, that he only had 36 yards against this Vegas defense back in week 4, but 7 catches is encouraging. 11 targets in that game, also really encouraging. He's a guy who routinely gets into double digits when it comes to targets, like more often than not, especially a receiver like him. It's not like he's not like Julian Edelman, catching these 2-yard outs right after the line of scrimmage. This is a downfield receiver that we're talking about. So more often than not, if he's hauling in 6 or 7 catches, 9 times out of 10, he's not going to be stopped for that few yards. So I think that trend kind of reverses and he has a big day.
John?
Yeah, the targets will be there. I mean, one of the most reliable target shares of any receiver in the league. So with that being in mind, and again, with the optimism on Herbert's end, I think this sets up well for Allen. So I look for the more on this one as well.
Let's go to Derek Carr on the other side, Raiders quarterback. Let's say his numbers 245.5 passing yards against the Chargers, who are allowing 224 yards per game. The only time this season Carr has not thrown for at least 200 yards was against the Chargers back in week 4. But since then, he's been well over that mark in just about every single game. John, 245.5 for Carr, more or less.
I'm going to take the less. Maybe I'm just a jilted Derek Carr haver in a super flex league, and I was disappointed in his production down the stretch. But I do think that this sets up poorly for him. I know he's got to play well in this spot. A ton is on the line, but I don't think he rises to the occasion. I think that this one is going to be a bad day for Carr. I'll take the less.
Nick?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a bad day necessarily. It's like if the Raiders are going to win this game, you probably want to muck it up a little bit. They're not going to be able to go shot for shot with the Chargers. Like if this game is played in the 30s, the Chargers probably win. They're the team that certainly has more big play ability, more firepower. But if Darren Waller plays in this game and he's listed as questionable, it's been limited at practice this week. Obviously, he hasn't played in a few weeks, was on the COVID list, has a knee injury. If he's back and looks like Darren Waller, that changes everything for this offense. But in the event that he's not, and I would guess as of right now, based on how these things go, even if he does play, he's probably not going to be close to 100%. I'll side with John here and take the less.
And last up, let's go with Hunter Renfrow. Let's give him a line of 65.5 more or less receiving yards for Renfrow. Nick, how do you feel about Hunter this week?
Got to go more. It's unbelievable that he is essentially the exact same player that he was in college, where you're watching him at Clemson and saying, like, how is this guy doing this? Like, this is a guy that was probably a monster in high school, like one of those guys you hated playing against, but everybody was like, well, he won't be able to do it at the next level. And everybody said that about him in college. And now here we are. And he's every single week, it seems like it's, 3rd and 8, game on the line. Who are they going to? Hunter Renfrow, tough catch over the middle, falling over the line for a first down. Like it's unbelievable how valuable he's been for them. And if Waller doesn't play, I mean, he's essentially their number one receiver right now. So even if Carr struggles a little bit against this Chargers defense, I think a lot of the targets are going to be funneled toward Renfrow. So I'll go more on that.
I think the country should be grateful that the Patriots did not draft him, because it'd probably be nauseating.
Patriots would never lose a game
if he was in New England. John, how do you feel about Renfrow this week?
Yeah, it was in this very same matchup that I decided that I do like Hunter Renfrow. Earlier this season, Monday night game, Raiders, Chargers try to pull a fake punt. Renfrow just lays some dude out like completely. Right. And I'm like, wait a second, that rocks. So now I'm unquestionably a Hunter Renfrow guy through and through. None of it really makes sense how he's doing it, like Nick said, but representation for schlubby white guys like myself out there getting it done. So I do feel like in the real sense, like his role in this offense is extremely important. If the Raiders are going to do anything through the air, it's probably going to be through him, regardless of the Waller situation. So the way that those two are clicking right now, I think you got to go with the more.
All right, guys. Anything else this week?
Some personal news. Joined a bowling league. We're gonna get that fired up later this month. We got shirts that we're gonna have. It's going to be electric. So I said it on Twitter. Join the bowling league. Watch this space. So a lot of good content.
Do we have a team name?
So one of our teammates is a environmental biologist. So our trivia team name is always Save the Bees, but I proposed, with it being a bowling team, Spare the Bees. So that's what we're going to roll with.
Very good.
Get it, because a spare is like a bowling term.
It sure is.
That is.
I've been watching YouTube. I've been training for this. I'm really trying
just grinding Pete Weber tape.
Have you?
Who do you think you are? I am.
Have you purchased your own ball yet, John?
Not yet. I've heard that the house balls at Midtown Bowl are pretty solid. So I'm gonna take their word for it. But once I really hone my craft, I think that's when I'll start to consider taking the plunge and getting the John McKechnie custom.
And another follow up for you: are you going to be one of those guys that wears like the full wrist guard?
I hope not. But I gotta protect my medicals, man. If there's some undue stress on the wrist, then like 100% I'm wearing, a full on, brace that like covers my entire arm if I have to, it's
I'm thinking like the JJ Watt.
Yeah. Just like, I'm like basically a robot.
Yeah, exactly.
Is he allowed to bowl in that? Yeah.
Right. Well, at the very least, maybe like an NBA shooting sleeve would be cool.
All right, we got to be careful because we don't want Midtown Bowl to start doing randomized drug tests on John here based on some of this conversation.
Well, I think we need to get in contact with Midtown Bowl and get some props up for John's bowling league.
Actually,
I think we absolutely
could do this, John. As long as you can get us some tape, some video footage of the bowling, we could assess it with our risk department.
Oh my God, yes. Okay, can do. And I know that Waffle House has shooting sleeves, so I think I might invest in a Waffle House shooting sleeve. But would that be too much? Would it clash with the shirt? That's a decision for down the road.
Very good. All right. Well, there you go, guys. Subscribe to Monkey Knife Fights YouTube page, and we'll have bowling content apparently as we go into the winter months with John McKechnie. So don't forget also Monday, our national championship. My dog is like doing right now. I can't concentrate, but I'm not sure what he's doing, but he's like snoring and burping at the same time. So anyways, Monday, national championship preview show. John and I, maybe Nick will join too. We'll talk to you guys then. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching and enjoy week 18.